Hi, Carl Valeri with Aviation Careers Podcast, and today we're going to talk about non-compete clauses and how it affects your career. You know, there's this new proposal by the Federal Trade Commission, which you may consider pro-employment a positive force in career progression. Well, we'll see what happens there. There's some news also. But to discuss this rulemaking and some recent news, I have with us an aviation attorney who's been on in the past, and that's Chris Pezalla. Hey, Chris, it's great to see you back on the show.
Hey, Carl, great to be back.
So one of the things that we're going to talk about, again, is non-competes, and there's been a lot of news around this. We usually don't do many newsy items, but I think this is kind of an important one. It comes up often. So we're going to talk about the recent news, but we're going to talk a little more in generalities. But before we get started, as a lot of people have asked me about the career coaching that we do, we know we do that one-on-one coaching, and in these tougher times, it can be a little bit expensive for people. So we started doing this group coaching mastermind, and it's only $20 a month, and that gets you motivated, also keeps you informed, and we do a meeting once a month, and it's when you join, you get to actually listen to all the past episodes, which is really cool and it's really helpful because you can ask questions. So we have an inspirational story. We do an industry update. I talk about the hiring and what's going on, and then we have a topic, and then we have this Q&A. And also, by the way, if you want to get involved in that and get 1 month free, we have a coupon. It's actually Coach It Forward if you want to get involved in that career coaching. But another thing that we do that really is helping people, especially in these tough times, is we have that scholarships guide. And our sponsor is actually giving away some of those scholarships guides by using the coupon code STRATUS. The sponsor of this podcast is Stratus Financial. That's a private student lending for pilots by pilots. Stratus Financial offers student loans for pilot training from zero to hero. Stratus Financial understands your needs because they are pilots, and you can find out more at stratus.finance. And as a sponsor of this podcast, they're giving away scholarships guides, and you get yours for free going to aviationcareerspodcast.com/free and using that code Stratus. You know, whether it's financing your dream of flying or simplifying the process by taking care of your student loans, their efficient, hassle-free funding can connect you to the life of your dreams by becoming a professional pilot sooner than you ever thought possible. To find out more, visit stratus.finance. Well, let's get on with the main topic today. And again, that is actually these non-compete clauses that a lot of airlines, 135s, et cetera, are making you sign right now. And there's a new rule. And this new rule, by the Federal Trade Commission is actually, basically going to make those non-competes null and void. Well, that's an oversimplification. But interestingly enough, there's a judge that actually ruled that they can't really enforce this near total ban on non-compete agreements. And that is actually set to go into effect on September 4th of 2024. And so basically, they're making this, and they're saying that's blocking an effort by the agency to make labor markets more competitive. So this is interesting. This really is. So we're going to talk about it with an attorney, but just in general, again, we don't normally talk about newsy items, but I thought this was really important. And you'll be able to use this information about non-competes. I want to make it really general. But first, let's talk specifically about non-competes in generalities, but also how this rule applies. So Chris, if you could explain a little bit, what is a non-compete clause? Let's start there.
Well, a non-compete clause is a clause located within an employment contract or the sale of a business where you agree not to compete with your employer once you leave. So say you work in a firm, you do sales, you agree that you're not going to go to another sales company, usually for a period of time, 6 months, maybe a year or two. And that's because they don't want you, of course, going to their competitor and taking their clients. And we see this in different forms. We also see it a lot with upper management, where they may know a lot of the business strategies of a company, and they don't want that knowledge going to their competitors. So they require that person not to compete with them in that industry for a period of time. And normally this is agreed on the front end as part of the employment that when you leave, those terms will apply.
Interesting. So as far as non-competes are concerned, this is going to be a very broad question, but should I, as a pilot, sign a non-compete clause?
So this is something we've seen a little bit more recently in the industry. For a very long time, we didn't worry about non-competes for pilots. We didn't really see non-compete agreements for pilots because pilot skills are somewhat of a commodity in the sense that there's multiple pilots, and they're not usually privy to specific business information like business strategy or finances of a business. But more recently, because of the pilot shortage we saw over the last few years, we did see companies sometimes trying to do a non-compete in addition to training contracts and other things. The enforceability of those has varied state to state, and they're part of state law. So if you're considering agreeing to a non-compete or you've got one, you're going to want to get advice from an attorney in your local area or in your state at least to make sure you have an understanding of how your state law applies to it.
So that this rule, this new proposed rulemaking, and I kind of summarized it a little bit. Basically, it's striking down most of these non-competes, except in certain instances. It's more geared towards frontline employees. This new proposed rulemaking, as has been in the news, was struck down by a judge in Texas. So how does that affect everybody nationwide? Maybe you can explain that again.
Sure. So the rule that was proposed, the Federal Trade Commission had proposed a rule that would supersede state law and for the most part prohibit non-compete agreements. There were some exemptions for existing ones depending on your position in the company, but going forward, it was generally going to ban most but not all non-competes. This was a huge move. And probably the most interesting thing the FTC has done in a long time. Most of us forget that they exist, right? So, unless you work in the financial field, I give them a hard time. But this rule was intended to prevent companies from using non-compete agreements. And what we've seen, of course, is an immediate legal challenge, which is not unexpected. When you have a large regulatory change, you often see a legal challenge to it that ends up either causing that law or regulation to be struck down or causing it to be limited in its utilization. So what we've seen here recently is at least 3 major cases, including one in Texas in which the judge has just ruled that the ban is not permissible. In other words, the FTC cannot create that rule banning non-compete agreements. And the judge's basis is that the FTC has overstepped their bounds of what their authority is. This is very legal and technical and certainly up for debate. Most likely the agency will file an appeal. So right now we're at the district level, so we'll go up to a circuit level from there. And then, of course, it could reach the Supreme Court, but we don't know yet if it's going to go that far. So the short answer is we don't know the final fate. But in the meantime, non-compete agreements will continue to be enforceable in many states and in most situations. So my usual advice, as always, is never sign something if you don't intend to honor it. And I think that definitely applies here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of people always ask, how does this affect me? Well, it affects you when you're in a contract like this is put in front of you. Then obviously, if you're not going to comply with that agreement, then don't sign it, like you said. But let's say that we're looking at it from a career perspective, these non-compete clauses, well, there's more to it. It's usually a contract that we're signing is more than just a non-compete. So there's another side to most of these contracts, and a lot of times it has to do with either bonus money or training money, or if you leave at a certain period, you have to pay the company back. So the big question that comes up from a lot of people is, does this mean I'm off the hook for the bonus money that I'm going to receive, or the training contract that I signed? For instance, I won't leave for a year and a half. If I do, I'm going to have to pay back the $80,000 in training fees. And I don't think it leaves you off the hook, but we're going to ask you, the attorney.
No, I have the same conclusion. I've looked at the language of the ban that did not go into place, but would have gone into place next month. And that does not apply to bonus money, training contracts, training notes. We at our law firm, we don't think that's going to apply at this point in time. So those, even if this ban on non-competes eventually goes through and non-competes stop becoming a regular feature of the contracts, all those other factors are still going to apply. So you're still going to have to repay bonus if you leave. You're still going to have to pay the training costs. And same advice there. If that's not something you can agree to, then rethink it before you sign on the dotted line.
As an aside, I'd love to kind of talk about this. Back years ago, we had a different kind of training contract, 25, 30 years ago, where we would actually pay the airline before we went to work. They called this pay for training, and you don't really see this anymore. So you would actually have to pay for your training costs before you actually join an airline. And back then, like when I got hired, they were paying $16,000 a year, and the training costs were $14,000. So you basically, you're out, basically making $2,000 for the year. That's just basically not making anything. So thank God those days are over. But now we are navigating this new time where you're actually having these new contracts that are put in place. So one of the things that I always like to say moving forward when reviewing these non-competes is the fact that, kind of look where you are and look at what's best for you and look at what's best for your family. So if you look at your current situation, and this is where the career coaching comes in, if you look at your current situation and you look at another situation in this contract, even though you're not thrilled about the contract, it may be best situation for you, then my advice in that situation would be yes, to sign that contract. Of course, we'd have to talk about that on an individual basis, and we do that both in the group coaching session and also individually. But boy, there's a lot to think about here. So one of the things that I'd love to hear from you is as far as moving forward with some of these non-compete clauses. I know you kind of already touched on this, but let's really solidify it. What advice do you have moving forward when reviewing some of these non-compete clauses?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you can read that, that's going to be super helpful. And the reason I say it that way is because a lot of times these contracts get dropped on you on the first day of INDOC. And it's like, well, welcome to your new job, and here to sign this packet. If you have the time, it really helps to read it. If you can get a copy of that in advance or talk to somebody who's already works there, that makes a lot of sense. If not, you may just have to say, hey, can I look at this over lunch and come back and sign it? Because whatever you sign for, of course, you are agreeing to. I think with the industry now, things have calmed down a little. We'll see less non-competes, and also we'll see a lot of employers that won't want to wade into this legal situation as to whether that ban applies, so they may just give up on it. The other thing I have to say is if a company does have really strict rules on training costs and on a non-compete, you also have to investigate that company a little more and make sure that they're not doing that because they're losing pilots. And there are some employers out there that are not as good as others, and they try to hold people in these jobs. So doing your research in advance is really important. Know if you're willing to make that commitment to that company.
Yeah, absolutely. And you may want to, but that's an individual choice. Really good advice. But of course, take care of yourself and take care of your family first. And this might be the best thing for your career. It may not, but the best thing to do is actually talk to somebody. And sometimes that means if you do get a contract of talking to an attorney, and I know that Chris, he actually can review these type of contracts. And by the way, Chris, we should mention the law firm that you're with and how they can reach you.
Yes, well, I'm with the law offices of Robert M. Strumer, LLC. We're based out of Santa Fe, but I actually run the Florida office. We cover a couple other states as well. So we're certainly happy to review these, or if it's in a state we're not in, we'll be happy to send you in the direction of an aviation attorney who does work in those fields.
Chris, I'm going to put in the show notes links to all the different articles about this and the things that you should consider. But as far as going forward with this, what advice would you have to someone as far as these non-competes and actually doing their research going forward?
The biggest research is going to be to know the company that you're talking to. I know that the stuff that goes up on the web boards is not always 100% accurate or maybe not the best portrayed, but it's still worth the time to do that research, maybe even reach out to somebody who's worked for one of these companies and see what their experience has been. And that could give you an idea. That way, when you come in the first day and that paperwork just gets put in front of you, you have an idea of what exactly you're agreeing to.
Awesome. Chris, like I said, we usually don't do these industry updates like this. We're not really newsy, but this was terrific to have this now. And I think it does help people in general. I mean, to going forward in their careers and also when they're researching non-competes. If you listen to this, a year from now, you'll learn something from it. So, Chris, I appreciate your coming here. I really do. I think this is going to be great, and I can't wait to talk to you again on a future podcast.
Thank you, Carl. And in the meantime, I'm going to work on getting a more interesting background. I've achieved my goal as getting the most boring background possible.
For those listening, go to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Aviation Careers Podcast, and you can actually see his most wonderful background there. But we do have some cool airplanes in our background here, and of course, I have the crystal ball where I am able to predict aviation careers futures and aviation future, but no financials except for aviation companies. So, but I jest. One of the things that I love to do, though, is to do a deep dive into the different jobs, the different companies, and what things mean in the industry. And we do that through our group career coaching. And you can check that out on our coaching page. And if you want to get 1 month free as part of that group career coaching mastermind, you can use Coach It Forward. But one thing I'd really appreciate you doing for me is, we talk a lot about non-competes and we talk a lot about different things in your career. But the most important thing is to do the thing that's best for you and your family. And in this environment, any environment, is keep moving forward. Flight time, flight time, flight time. Get new ratings. But every day I want you to do this. I want you to look at something that you can do to help you move forward with your career and in your life. Well, take care, and we'll see you in the next episode. And don't forget to take one step today to move forward in your career and in your life.